Spoiler from Mushoku Tensei Volume 19. If you haven't read it, then I suggest you do so before continuing on to this video. After many years living in the university, Zanabo has finally received a letter urging him to return home. But little does he know, a lot of things have changed since he was gone. Hello everybody, this is the Anime Bro here and welcome to another video. And today I'll be reviewing Mushoku Tensei Volume 19. Now before this video starts, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this. And come back next time as I talk about Volume 20. And now, let's begin the video. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the story. Now Volume 19 is up there as one of my favorite volumes in Mushoku Tensei. It got all things that I really do like. This volume is about one specific person, Zanabo, and also a bit about his brother, Pax. It helps grow characters that I didn't know I wanted to know more about, like Pax and Zanabo. Mostly this whole volume is about Pax and Zanabo as a whole. Mostly Zanabo because we're with him most of the time, but all in all, it is still pretty interesting knowing about his backstory and also, some things that we learn about him. And it also is an interesting thing that we get to see Rudius see how much he really cares about his friend, and shows that the relationship that he built with Zanabo is something he really does cherish. Like, he goes to war for Zanabo, doesn't even care. He even, kills people just because Zanabo needed the help to win a war, even though he's never done such a thing before. It's a really good volume in my opinion. But it also doesn't just have those two. We also get a bit more about Roxy and how she was when she was tutoring Pax, and apparently it wasn't that good. We also get to learn more about what Pax has been up to since the last time they met. And we also get to learn how tragic Pax's life was as a character. And also it has one of the saddest moments in my opinion. And it's not even someone that Rudius knew well. It was because of Pax, and I'll get to that moment later on. All in all, this volume is a really good volume, and definitely up there as one of my favorites. Alright, now let's talk about characters. So the first character I want to talk about is Rudolph the Death God. Now, surprisingly enough, we actually get to learn a lot about him in this volume. One thing that he's described to look like is a corpse, and a lot of people are pretty scared of him because of this. Also, some interesting thing about his bloodline is that he's the grandson of the second North God. I don't know who that is, but this kind of shows that, sword fighting is in his blood if he's a descendant of the North God. He became the fifth great power, which is pretty impressive since he is a human. He is not like some magical creature. He's a very powerful human and probably the strongest human in the world, but the fifth strongest person in the world. He soon became a chef, which is one of the things he wanted to become, but sadly failed because apparently his cooking was not that great. And then soon, after many years or so, he became the bodyguard to Pax. But believe it or not, it was actually his cooking that made him become a bodyguard to Pax. He really likes Pax. In fact, he considers Pax as one of his probably best friends. Now, of course, even though he is human, there is parts of him that is elf and demon. So that's probably why he is the fifth greatest power. He has other bloodlines to actually help him with his fighting styles and whatnot. And he also has a demon eye called the Eye of Severance, which I think makes a barrier around it. I don't really remember, but it's not like an actual barrier. It's more of an illusion, I guess, to say. Next, we got Zanabo. Yes, I know the main volume is about him, but I decided to talk about him over the next person. From the first time we met Zanabo to now, he's a bit calmer than before. most of the time when we're with Zanabo, he really likes figures. It's like one thing he is known for. In fact, that is one of the reasons why he became friends with Rudius, is because Rudius made figures. But one thing we do know now is that he really takes pride in his country. Well, kinda. What we get to learn from his mindset is that he does have pride for his country, but it grew over time. When he spent time with Rudius, he learned that, humans aren't just annoying talking people. They have actual feelings as well. And he learns to actually care for humans and also just anybody in general, especially when he see the relationship he has with Julia. He learns that there's more than life than just figurines. He's also very brave. He was willing to actually go and fight off many armies all by himself with just a couple of men during this war. And then also we learned that he was taught in the ways of the military as a child. So he's a really good leader. He's not just some prince. He actually has some knowledge that will help him to survive if he was ever given a high-ranking position in his kingdom. And that's all that we know about Zanabo right now. And then finally we get to, I think, probably the best character in this volume, and that is Pax. So Pax, during the time between the last time we saw him and now, was sent to the King Dragon realm as a hostage. Now he won the favor of the king through a grand academic tournament, or he probably didn't really, because we then learn that the king was actually a man-god disciple, so he probably orchestrated things so that Pax would actually win. And eventually, because of this, he was allowed to return home and reclaim the throne through killing all his family members and all that, with the help of not only the death god, but, a couple of men at his beck and call. He also has a wife who loves him dearly, and he also lost some weight compared to what he was then. So, that's pretty good for him. Although, throughout the volume, we do learn one thing about Pax that's actually kind of sad. The fact that he has had a hard life. Throughout his life, no one really praised him for what he did. Even his tutor, Roxy, never praised him or gave him acknowledgement when she was tutoring. Because she compared Pax to Rudius, whatever he did was never good enough. Pax learned intermediate magic, which for those who know is a hard magic to learn in this world. But instead of acknowledging him, Roxy just said, "It's about time you did this." And that really hit him hard. He tried so hard to do this, only for your tutor to just say, "Wow, you finally did it. It was about time you learned how to do something like this." And even though Roxy was, younger then, it still kind of is a bit sad to just have your work just shut down like that, really. In fact, I will say Pax became one of the characters I sympathize with, because, there are many times throughout a person's life where even if you work your hardest, even if you try so hard, some people just don't see it. All they see is that you did the bare minimum. They don't see the work you put in to actually do it. They just see how long it took for you to learn something. And I really felt bad for him. And that is all I have to say about him. All in all, these are really good characters in Volume 19. There are some more characters in here, but I think these three kinda are just the main focus of this volume. Alright, now let's talk about location. Now honestly, like normal, location doesn't really have much to it. We already been to Shirione, so really, I don't really have to go into details, but we were able to find 2 other locations besides Shirione. But let's talk about Shirione and what's happening right now. So Pax has become king. He's killed all his siblings and all their children, and now is king of Shirione. So that's that. And also because of this, Shirione is now at war with the Northern Kingdom. So that is pretty bad for the kingdom, especially since he's already been through a rebellion. That is pretty much a bad sign when you used most of your men towards this rebellion. And that's kind of it for Shirione. We just know more locations that are in it. So the first location that is in Shirione is Fort Karen. Now it is the northern part of Shirione and is where Zanabo was stationed when he first came back. It is a well-made fortress with catapults and watchtowers, so it's good as a fort. It is made between the fork of two rivers, which increase its protection, really. Crossing a river, especially if it's during the winter, is terrifying to do, and also it slows down armies, which allows your army to actually get advantage of it. And about 500 men are stationed here. Not really big, but it's at least something. It's better than nothing. And that's all we know about Fort Karen. We don't know any history or anything, just that. That's basically it. And then finally, we got the Castle of Shirione, which I'm surprised we didn't get much in Volume 6, but better late than never. So, in this castle, it has a secret passageway that goes from the dungeon to the mill, which is surprising that Rudius never went through that way, although Zanabo helped him when he was trapped there, so I guess it was a silver lining. He was able to meet Zanabo and stuff, so I guess it's kind of a good thing he didn't escape or notice this secret passage. Besides that, we also learned that there is 5 floors in this castle. So the first floor is where the living quarters are, and Roxy actually has a room here. She went in to actually, remember the good time she had in this castle. Then the second floor is where the throne room is, and also the entrance hall and other waiting rooms for guests. Then the third room has like an office where it seems like political discussions are held. And also on this floor, it has many passages to towers and many of its defenses. So that, just in case they go through a siege and they need to kill all the people trying to take over the castle. Then the fourth floor is where the princesses and princes and even their royal guards stay. So that's, I guess, the royal family floor, if you want to be technical. And then the fifth floor is where the king's room is, mostly just where he sleeps and keeps all his clothes and stuff, just the normal bedroom. And that is all that I have on these locations. If you think I missed something, comment down below and tell me what I missed, like always, and maybe I'll put it in a future video. Alright, now let's talk about the best moments in this volume. So the first moment that I want to talk about is Zanabo's decision. Now in this moment, Zanabo, Cliff, and Lena Elise, Ginger, Julia, and Rudius come together to talk about Zanabo coming home. Rudius and Cliff don't want him to go because they sense it's a trap. Obviously Rudius thinks this because Pax, the last time they met him, was actually pretty bad. He trapped Rudius just to get Roxy. So in his mind, he knew something fishy was going on. And most likely, Zanabo was there to just be killed. Because, he also has a claim to the throne and whatnot. But Zanabo explains why he's going. He mostly thinks it's his right to protect his country because, Rudius and Cliff have been living their lives fulfilling their duties and whatnot. And Zanabo wants to do that too. And because of this, they kind of actually allow him to go. Rudius kind of still hesitant a bit, but he still allows him to do whatever he thinks is right. And I really do like this moment because it kind of puts a different perspective to Zanabo. Zanabo was always this guy that was so obsessed with figures and also like engineering and stuff that was all he wanted to talk about. He didn't care about Ginger. He didn't care about any humans besides Rudius, Cliff, and Julia. He just only cared mostly about his figures and stuff. But the fact that he's doing this and acting a bit more responsible was probably one of the coolest things to actually be seen in this volume. And just to be seen from Zanabo himself. And I really do like this moment. Next, we got the Grey Rat family meeting. So after some stuff with Orstrid and after Zanabo makes his decision, Rudius gets his family together and tells them he is leaving again. And everything just goes normal, they talk about mostly like what's going to happen with Eris, when she gives birth. Roxy and Sylphie really liked it when Rudius was there, and when they were giving birth, he was there to comfort them. But Eris doesn't really care. She's like, I will give birth, and when you come back, the baby will be born. And spoiler, that actually is what happens, so, I guess she did well. But everything went well until Laura starts crying for some reason. Rudius holds her and tries to calm her down until Roxy goes and holds her. Laura's still crying no matter who's holding her until Roxy tells her that she is going to go with him. And then all of a sudden, Laura actually calms down. And that is very surprising. And the reason why I put this moment here is even though this is a normal thing, it's when Laura starts crying that it becomes a big thing. Laura is supposed to be this savior. In fact, that's like the one reason why Leo is so obsessed with actually being near her. She's supposed to be the savior of the future. And the fact of the matter is she stopped crying when she heard Roxy was going with him shows that there's something that actually might happen. Like, will Rudius actually die if Roxy doesn't go with him? Who knows? Well, I do now, but it was something to actually build up some tension of what's going to happen now. And I really do like that. Next, we got Zanabo talks with Pergius. So, to cut their trip in half, Zanabo talks with Pergius to actually be teleported closer to Shirione. Now, when Rudius and Zanabo go to Pergius to tell him what's going to happen, Pergius is not happy about this, because during the time that Zanabo is there, they actually did kind of grow a unique friendship, you may say. They do like talk about the architectural stuff that they have, and they do like talking about other things together. So, it's a sad thing that he has to go. Pergius doesn't want to, but he understands what he has to do, and he just wishes him well. And eventually, Zanabo asks to use the teleporter. This is where he tells him, but he says that he wants to bring Roxy with him. Pergius doesn't want Roxy in his castle, but Zanabo stands his ground and tells him, look, my friends are going to come with me to make sure that I'm safe and all that. And in order for him to actually come, his wife needs to be here. And even though she's a demon, I want this to happen. And believe it or not, Pergius actually changes his mind and actually allows a demon into his house. And that's basically what happens in this moment. And the reason why I like this is because it's another good Zanabo moment. He stands up for what he believes in and tells Pergius that, like, this may be your house, but I need them to be with me so that it can comfort them, really, to see that he is going to be safe when he is over there. And he also stands up to a guy who's very revered, which is pretty impressive. Next, we got like a mini moment, and that is Zanabo saying goodbye to Nanahoshi. Now, not much is happening. While they're there, Zanabo says goodbye to Nanahoshi, and they both talk about the past and end up hugging each other. And it really is something cool about it, because Zanabo really did help Nanahoshi a lot with the teleportation projects, because now she's a little bit closer to getting home than she was before. And it really is a nice moment of these two just, hugging it out and just, being nice friends, saying goodbye. And that is all for this moment. The next moment I want to talk about is the journey to Fort Karen. Now, this isn't really a big moment. This is just, Rudius, Roxy, and Zanabo talking about their past. The things that have happened. Roxy becoming a teacher and also a tutor for PAX. Rudius, talking about how Zanabo has met and all that stuff. A nice, easy conversation that they do while they're traveling. A good moment about friends, just talking about the past memories. Next moment I want to talk about is the battle at the fort. So this plays out just like a normal battle. You get Rudius and Roxy using magic from a distance, while Zanabo goes to the front lines and charges towards the enemy. Rudius at first felt fine with killing soldiers, but it becomes like a sickening thing that he killed people he talked to. Not just enemy people, but people that he kind of grew close with, even though he was only there for a couple days. And it kind of does put in perspective that war is pretty dangerous. Even if you don't try to, sometimes the casualties will even go to people you know. And that's all I have to say about that moment. Next, we got Ginger arrives at the fort. So some time has passed, and Ginger arrives at the fort to tell Zanabo what happened in the capital. What happens is that after the rebellion, another rebellious group goes over to the capital and tries to actually put some other person on the throne besides Pax. And when Zanabo hears this, he wants to go and charge in to save Pax. Ginger doesn't want this because she hates Pax. Pax forced her to actually fight people because he had her family as hostages, so that she had to do whatever she wanted. And she tries to get Rudius to stop him as well. But he fails, really. Mostly because during their talking, Zanabo actually says, like, even though Pax did these terrible things and stuff, he's still my brother. He's the only family I have, and it would be really sad for him to actually go and be killed. And Rudius doesn't stop him. He's just like, okay, but I'm going with you, just to make sure that he's safe. And it's a really heartwarming moment, and it really does show that Zanabo is willing to do anything for his family, and also shows how much he changed. He couldn't care less about Pax before, but now how things have become, he's going to do his best to actually save Pax, which is really interesting. He does really have some cool character development. Then next we get a really sad moment, which is Pax's suicide. So Roxy, Zanabo, and Rudius go to the capital and try to save Pax. But it turns out Pax wasn't really in any danger. The army was just outside the walls. The only person really there was the Death God. After Pax was doing something with his wife, don't worry, it was consensual, so it wasn't that bad. Pax talks with Roxy, Zanabo, and Rudius about his life and all his problems. And this is where we kind of get the point where you really do feel bad for him. So first off, we learned that ever since he was a baby, people looked at Pax terribly. No one really was nice to Pax. Anything he did, people just didn't like it. And especially when it came to his tutor, Roxy, he said like it was the worst part. Not because he was a pervert and he wanted her to do things. It was because whenever he tried something, Roxy just wasn't interested. He tried his hardest to get to intermediate magic. And when he finally did, he said that Roxy just sighed, and she probably even muttered, "It was about time you did that." And that was like a big moment in his life that he realized, wow, this is terrible. I can't believe this happened. I worked so hard and you won't acknowledge me. And he also goes and talks about the other stuff that happens. Like when he was in the Empire, no one cared about him. He was just there as a hostage. The only person that cared about him, or somewhat cared about him, was his wife. And the Death God. I will actually talk about this moment later on in the video. And even when he actually took back his capital and all that, none of the soldiers or even the farm people supported him. He didn't even get support from the king in the Dragon King realm. He had no one. No one cared that he did this. No one bothered to go with him. No one bothered to send help. It was then that he realized no one really cares about his life. And as soon as that happens, he just goes off and jumps off the balcony. Zanabo actually goes with him, and I think he actually jumps too, and lands pretty hard. When Rudius goes and sees what happens, Zanabo tells him to heal Pax's body. Like, hurry up, please, hurry up. Save him, save him. But Rudius says, it's too late, he's dead. And Zanabo begins to cry. And this is like one of the saddest moments in not just this volume, but in Mushoku Tensei. Because when you first meet Pax, everyone thought this. He was a terrible guy. Whenever we hear things from Roxy, it was that, oh, he's not as good as you. And at times, we thought maybe, he wasn't paying attention or not. But then when we get to here, we learn it wasn't the fact that he wasn't good. He just wasn't as good as Rudius, which is, of course, something normal, because Rudius is not a normal person. So it makes his suicide a lot worse. And I definitely have to say it is one of the saddest things in Mushoku Tensei. Next, we got Roxy is depressed. So after Pax kills himself, Roxy, Zanabo, and Rudius stay in an inn. And it's been lately that Roxy has been depressed ever since encountering Pax. And in her mind, she thinks, I did this. I should have actually tried my best to become a better tutor. I should have tried my best to actually help him grow, but I was too focused on Rudius. Rudius, of course, goes in and comforts her and tells her, even though Pax was someone that you didn't help, you've helped many others. You've helped me, you've helped many of the students in the university, you helped a lot of other people. It kind of helps, but it probably would take a while before she does recover. At the end, she seems to recover, so it's not that bad. But I do like this moment because it shows a kind of interesting thing about Rudius. Mostly the fact that he kind of doesn't see her as a goddess at this moment. He just sees her as a normal person, which is a flaw I really didn't like about Rudius. How much he put Roxy above everyone. And here he is willing to accept that she has faults. Instead of saying, oh, you're the perfect being in the world, he's like, people make mistakes. And it's okay to, feel bad about them, because it shows that you really want to improve as a person. Next, we got Zanabo's mindset. Now, this moment is very self-explanatory. We get to see what Zanabo was thinking during this whole volume and also during his life. And here is where we learn of many things that is really interesting. So, he never cared for humans. All he wanted was figurines in his life. He didn't care for Ginger. He didn't really care for anybody, really. All he saw as a difference between humans and figurines was that humans talked and stuff, while figurines just stood there for anyone to see. That is until he met Rudius. Rudius created these things he always wanted. And eventually, when they would meet up again in the university, he eventually got to see a different perspective of a human. Humans aren't just beings that could talk and stuff. They actually have emotions. And the person he actually has the closest relationship to, Julia, becomes someone he actually treasures dearly. In fact, the one thing he actually asked Cliff and Rudius to do before he had to leave was look after Julia, because Julia was a sibling to him, someone that he could not live without. And if anything bad were to happen, he knew he couldn't handle it really well. And I do like the mindset of Zanabo. It really shows how much of a person he's changed, because we start off with a guy who just loves figurines to a guy who, yes, he loves figurines, but when something needs to happen for him, he is willing to just drop the figurines. And I really do like that. And then, finally, we got the return. Now, honestly, this is just like any other return for Rudius. He comes home, has a family, and all that's new is really he has a son now, and his son is really like him, and I do mean in the perverted way, because when Rudius tries to hold him, he tries to grope him, but he realizes he has nothing, and he starts to cry. So, yeah, that's a really disturbing fact about his son. But mostly the reason why I like this moment is what happens with Zanabo and Julia. Zanabo and Julia go together and they reunite. Julia saying, you better not, let me stay behind while you go somewhere, okay? Because I want to be by your side forever. And Zanabo was like, okay, I'll always make that happen. I'll never part from you. I really do like this volume. This is definitely Zanabo's volume, and I really enjoyed reading it all the way through, from beginning to end. And then finally, I gotta talk about the extra chapter. Not since the first ever volume have I actually been interested in an extra chapter. The extra chapter basically talks about what was going on with Pax, how he met his wife, how he met the Death God, and just like things that happened between it. And the thing I gotta say is it's happy but also very sad, like volume 7. Because it starts off like everyone meeting each other, and then it actually cuts in right before Rudius, Roxy, and Zanabo go up to save him. And it reveals that Pax actually had this planned out from the beginning. He knew that no one was going to care if he died. He knew nothing was going to actually change that matter. So he tells the Death God, once my wife gives birth, make sure to tutor my son and spoil him rotten. Because he thinks that because his son will share his name and also be like his offspring, he's not going to have many options for a tutor. That's why he wanted the Death God to actually tutor him, because the Death God knew Pax. Pax was a nice guy, and in fact, the one thing that's interesting is we learned that the Death God was sad when he heard he was going to kill himself. He didn't want Pax to die. He wanted him to live on. He knew that this man gone through the same similarities he has. It's just that, Pax had enough. He couldn't handle it. But all in all, this was really one of the best extra chapters in my opinion. I would say it ties with Zenith's mindset, but honestly, I think this could go a little bit higher in my opinion. And yeah, that is all the moments. I know this is pretty long, but I had a lot to talk about in this volume. Alright, now let's end this video. Now honestly, I'm ranking this volume an A. This was probably one of the best volumes I've ever had. It's not my favorite volume. I still have 7 as one of my best, but this definitely was close. In fact, I could safely say this was probably my second volume. We got great things with Zanabo. We got great moments with Pax. We even have great moments with the Death God. This was pretty amazing. Many characters had their moments to shine, and many people had their stories concluded here. Zanabo's now living free as just a random guy, and Pax is dead. And I couldn't believe it, but I kind of felt bad for the dude. He really didn't need to go that way. I never felt this bad since Volume 7. Yeah, there probably were many moments where I could have felt bad, but this definitely was one of the times where I felt pretty terrible at the end. If I were to say some minor things I probably didn't like, it was the fact that we didn't go between Zanabo and Rudius' mindset. I think that would have been more interesting if we actually got to see a lot of stuff through Zanabo's mindset. Like, we did get it, but I wanted more. This was Zanabo's story after all. We could have seen like what he was really thinking about during that time he went into battle. But all in all, it was still a good volume, and definitely up there as one of my favorite volumes in Mushoku Tensei. Alright, and that is the end of this video. If you really enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this. And come back next time as I talk about Volume 20. Pax is dead and Zanabo's no longer a royal. But it seems like Zanabo's story will still continue on. And as always, I am the Anime Bro. And see you guys later. Peace!